Big happenings at New College of Florida, where Chris Rufo is absolutely tearing up the pavement. He's mowing it to the ground and building it back from the ground up. There is so much going on that I missed something from 2 days ago. Apparently, they had their first Board of Trustees meeting since the 6 board members appointed by Desantis, joined, and they got rid already of the existing incumbent president of the college. Now, just as a refresher for those of you who maybe haven't heard me talk about this before or are tired of hearing about it, I think that this is one of the most important developing stories in the country because the universities have been a stronghold of the left for so many decades, for longer than any of us probably can remember or even have been alive. And every year, the university systems across America churn out more and more leftists, which in the past few years have become increasingly insufferable. It's not just anymore that the kids who go to college, by a factor of 9 to 1, vote Democrat once they graduate. It's not that, just that, nice, happy Christian kids become atheists or something like that. We're way beyond that. We are at a stage in American decline where you have sane but impressionable kids who go off to college and come back only one semester later, or maybe even not even a whole semester. They just come back for Thanksgiving, and they're insane. They're beyond repair. They are irredeemable human beings, at least for the foreseeable future. They're gone. And until you address that, the left has a very reliable chain of factories that churn out left-wing activists across this country. And so even if we win short-term victories, like on, constitutional carry, or maybe building a border wall, people always, for so many people, for so many years, they always wanted to build the wall. Well, what good is it if you build your wall and then the left just keeps churning out more and more social justice activists from the universities, so that within a number of years, your state that is, very much in favor of, controlling the border and having a somewhat restrictive immigration policy is now dominated by the left. And they can just go bulldoze your wall like they did in Arizona. Okay, so you got to attack the source of the poison. Our society has been poisoned for decades by higher education. Now it's being poisoned by K through 12 education, which is going to have an even more disastrous effect because kids are mandated to go there. It's not just like, with the higher education where it's optional. But that's a different matter. Because let's just assume, hey, there's a certain percentage of kids, still a pretty sizable percentage, who make it through K through 12 education with their brains intact, with their souls intact, and then they go off to college, and that's where they're corrupted. And so this project, led spiritually at the very least by Chris Rufo at New College, is crucial. Now, this is probably going to be the last time I get into that general explanation. I'm not going to give that every time because people who have heard me say this now 3 or 4 times are probably tired of hearing it. But what happens at this small college on the west coast of Florida is going to impact universities throughout the rest of the state of Florida, which is the 3rd largest state by population. And by extension, it's going to impact the rest of the country, because if we finally have universities that are not openly hostile to the right, I think that is going to attract right-of-center students from across the entire country, and it's going to start with this small school. The success of this project is going to impact the vigor and the strength and the momentum that we're going to have to reform the rest of the universities throughout the country. Right now, this small college that they're taking over is basically on life support. I listened to Chris Rufo's remarks that he gave last week to some of the faculty, and he said that the cost of every graduate to the state, of every graduate from this college, is something like $200,000. And that, you compare that with like Florida State, which I believe is the oldest state university in Florida. A degree there only costs like $36,000. So it's not that hard for the university to recoup that cost. But at New College, it's impossible. This whole system, this whole extremely woke school is a massive drain on the taxpayer, which is why a lot of the legislature just wanted to close it down entirely. And so what Rufo's doing here is a Hail Mary. They're going to say, hey, let's do a full 180. Let's de-wokeify this school. And instead of making it completely hostile to the right and a haven for the left, like every other college, let's make it, maybe not hostile to the left. The left probably would view it as hostile compared to every other university. But let's say, hey, let's make it okay to be on the right and be a student at this college. As the governor's chief of staff said, make it the Hillsdale of the South. And if that's the case, ideally, since you have nowhere else to go, if you're a right-of-center person and you want to go to college and not be persecuted, you don't have a lot of options. Hillsdale's kind of always been seen as the best option because that's just a school that never went nuts. It's a pretty old private liberal arts college, I think, in Michigan. And they just never got woke or even, lefty to begin with. And so there's a massive untapped market of right-of-center kids who are graduating from high school that don't have anywhere to go. Even if you go to a pretty mainstream, and beloved state institution like the University of Florida, it's not very popular to be a right-winger. Not amongst the professors nor the student body. And what's interesting here about what Rufo's doing, he's made it clear. They're not going on defense here. They're not just saying, hey, stop bullying right-wingers into dropping out of school. Be tolerant of right-wing students who exist, in your left-wing institution. That's not it. He's actively saying what they plan to do is increase or widen or probably shatter the Overton window in this college. They're going to bring in professors who think differently. There are going to be probably even some English professors, psychology professors, certainly economics professors, history professors, who are not avowed communists. Some of them won't even accept the label progressive. Something I used to think about when I was in college is the fact that there are approximately 0 conservative academics. There's a lot of famous left-wing academics. But even among non-famous people, you don't really find academics who are conservative at all. You don't encounter that anywhere in college. Not even in published literature. In the literature of whatever given discipline you're talking about, because these people don't get jobs. There are a handful of libertarian professors. Sometimes you'll have these universities that maybe their alumni association is a little more moderate, and they're maybe not super comfortable with avowed Marxists peppered across every department at the university. And so maybe if they hire a really super hardcore Marxist, they'll also bring in like a libertarian to balance it out. But you're not usually gonna have people of a super intellectual firepower. And those that do exist, because there are, at least among libertarian academics, there are some pretty serious people but they are spread thin across this entire country. You know, you had Walter Block at Loyola. You've got, oh gosh, what's his name? The Swedish guy at, like, I think he's at Kansas State. There's that guy who's edited Rothbard's book on the Great Depression at, I think, Florida Southern College. You know, and then you've got, of course, the Cato Institute's home base, you know, the Cato Cucks at George Mason. But it's strange, you know, libertarians are a pretty small minority of the country. They are, compared to conservatives, overrepresented within academia. I don't think that libertarians are overrepresented in general. There's very few of them. But I'm saying there's even less of the conservatives. I can't name. I mean, who was there? Maybe, well, Thomas Sowell's retired. I was going to say, there was Thomas Sowell. He was a conservative academic. But he's long retired from teaching. He doesn't even write his column anymore. You know, I mean, Thomas Sowell, I think, in his late 80s now. And he's a great guy, real smart. But you don't have kids who are being taught by Thomas Sowell. The Thomas Sowells of the world don't get jobs in academia. And so, New College here is presenting an opportunity for the next generation of Thomas Sowells, or Paul Gottfried's, perhaps. I mean, Paul Gottfried, how long has it been since he taught anything, since he taught a class? Paul Gottfried, brilliant guy. It's great if you ever get to listen to him. I really admire his intellect, even though I'm, you know, it doesn't mean that I agree with his politics on a lot of stuff. There's lots of things I disagree with Paul Gottfried on. But he's interesting. He's thought-provoking. He is just a wealth of knowledge. He knows a lot about a lot of things that I don't know about. And you know what? There's a lot of left-wing college professors who are experts in fields that I don't know a lot about either. But it's hard to get a balanced view of anything when you're always hearing the left-wing perspective of every discipline in every single friggin' class. It's tiresome. And it does make you work harder as a student. That's something that I'll say about, you know, going to a Florida public college in this era. In this era before the great reforms that we're watching unfold in front of our eyes, is that I had to work a lot harder, I think, than the students who were just, you know, sponges who did what they were told, and the students who were, you know, just naturally inclined towards the left. Because I had to question everything. I had to do a lot of my own research, you know, beyond what you would normally do for the class. I had to do a lot of reading beyond the recommended readings for the class, because the recommended readings essentially said, you know, and depending on the topic, not everything is political, that, you know, hey, here's the left-wing perspective. And I thought, you know what, I don't really agree with that. I think there might be another side of the story. I had to go out and seek it myself. Come up with a more well-rounded understanding, and so I understood what the left thought about whatever the issue was, and I had my perspective that was informed and enhanced by the scholarship of people who were maybe more in line with my way of thinking. Because when you have no scholarship from the right, people who are of the right, who are students, are starting from zero when they're trying to formulate their own opinions. They can't really. It's not that you want an academic or a professor to tell you what to think, but ideas have to be developed over time. And arguments are sharpened the more that people read through them and critique them and think about them in their own head. Every time that you read someone else's idea, even if you look at that and you say, hey, I agree with that, you're going to have your own take on it, and you're going to develop that idea further. You're going to think, you know what, hey, I know that this person, you know, thought this was, you know, a great idea when they wrote it, but, you know, there's been, now that I think about it, I see it from a slightly different perspective, and therefore you're able to gain more knowledge. You're not just starting from scratch, you know, with your right-of-center perspective on this issue and everything's novel. You are able to build and stand on the shoulders of people who came before you, including, hopefully, some of your own professors. I mean, the idea that if we could just get a college to where it was like 60-40, 60 left, 40% right, when it came to the staff of any given department, you know, that would be a lot healthier. I mean, 50-50 or maybe even majority right-wing in time would be nice. I don't think that, people should just ignore the left entirely, because then you become as intellectually bankrupt as the left is itself these days. You don't want an echo chamber. You want people debating. And so you want to keep some folks around from the left in every department to combat you and to fight you and to challenge your beliefs, but not to ostracize you, not to destroy your life, not to give you an F because you disagree with them. You don't want leftist professors who are there to turn you into a soldier for the revolution. And the same is true, I think, ideally, for the right-of-center professors, because it doesn't help your side to have mindless drones. At least I don't think in the long term. I don't think it works out well. I don't think it's good for society. Even if I were of the left, I would encourage there being at least some conservative voices on campus, so that these kids have some understanding of just the breadth of intellectual thought. Here I am. I've been talking for 16 minutes. This has all been background again. I forgot to get to the actual news. I don't think I said this yet. If I have, then I guess good on me. But if I'm right, then what the hell is wrong with me? They booted the incumbent president of the college, so the leadership is gone. The board is now, majority right-thinking. The president's out. The new interim president is Richard Corcoran, who was the education commissioner of Florida under DeSantis. He is apparently a decent guy. I know the name. I don't know a whole lot about him. I've got to do more digging about him. I'm told that he only has a K-12 education, which is great. If you were educated by the university system over the past few decades, I don't think that that is a plus, to say the least. So if you have someone who is not a product of that system, I think that they're going to be better at trying to reform it. And I say that as someone who's a product of that system myself. The mandate these guys have is to turn New College into the Hillsdale of the South, which I think would mean that it's even more right-wing than what I've been talking about, in theory. I'm saying, hey, if we could just have, some balance of views, it would be a lot healthier. But considering the imbalance, that's in an ideal America, I'm saying, what you would want the composition of every university to be like. You would like there to be some diversity of thought, and people, critiquing each other, and you want people of different views interacting with one another, developing their ideas further. But we don't live in that perfect world. In the reality we live in, universities are 99.9% left-wing, except for Hillsdale. And so, if we're starting now with the second college that is not going to be entirely left-wing in the country, I can understand if they want to go more than 50% right-wing in terms of the faculty. Do I think that they're going to achieve that? I know probably not. I don't think that that's going to happen. And to be honest, when I say right-wing, I do mean it in like the left-wing sense. A right-winger is anyone who is not actively left-wing, anyone who is not actively pushing the insane social justice agenda. Anyone who is, that's going a little too far. I almost said anyone who's not grooming your kids is a right-winger. But you know what? I'm going to be a little more civil today. But, in today's society, that's basically the rule. And if we're just churning people out who are not beholden to the cult, who are not members of the cult, who are capable of critical thinking, you're going to have a right-wing country. There's no other way to put it. That's the way the critically thinking people 90% of the time are going now. Because if you engage with these ideas up close, and you are presented with an alternative, you're going to take the alternative. The only way that people fall into the leftist ideology that has become dominant over the past decade is when there is no alternative. When you're just told, hey, this is just the way things are. Men or women, and that's that. You might be a chubby guy with a neck beard, but you can be a beautiful woman too. All you have to do is assert that you're a beautiful woman. If you're an impressionable young kid and there's no one there to say, hey, this is nuts, you're going to go along with it, in all likelihood. But if you're presented with an alternative, when you're presented with reality, 99.9% of the time, people are going to go with reality. At least that's what I believe, that's what I hope. And I think that this is the most profound experiment in conservative leadership in decades in this country. No elected Republican has ever done anything as important as what Desantis is doing here. And I can't wait to see what kind of faculty they're going to hire for this next school year coming up next fall. We're still in like the winter or spring now, right? I guess technically it's still winter, right? It's hard for me to remember that. We don't really have a winter, here in Florida. Even on Groundhog Day, I'm asking myself, is it spring? So over the summer, I expect there's going to be a lot of hiring, and we'll see what sorts of names and what sorts of faces begin to appear on that campus. Richard Corcoran, apparently, when he was education commissioner, very strong proponent of keeping schools open, which in and of itself is not something that I think is super important, but it was a good litmus test. He was willing to stand up against the COVID mob back when it was very unpopular to do so, and therefore I think that he's shown that he has at least the capability to do so in this case. And I think that it's probably easier to stand up against woke college kids than it is to stand up against the COVID mob. Now, I do believe that this guy is an interim president, so it will be interesting to see if he stays on as a permanent president or if they find someone new. I will link to Chris Rufo's YouTube video in which he talks to the faculty, in which they jeer and hiss at him because they're big mad. So I regret how long this one went today. I really wanted to get to the point earlier about this new president and how changes are coming faster than I expected at this school. But, this is going to be something this is like a new beat for me. I think that there's not nearly enough people talking about this. This is going to be big news in the coming future. I think that New College is going to become a locus of right-wing thought. And frankly, I think that the American right needs an intellectual renaissance. I think that they need real thinkers. We have more of that than we did a few years ago. There are smarter people on the right. It used to be just like 100% grifters. Like the smartest, like what passed for intelligent thought on the right, on the mainstream right, was like the National Review. Which I don't know if you've read the National Review. Not very thought-provoking. There's nothing interesting in there. These are not impressive people who write for the National Review. It's quite the opposite, and that's how it was intended. To me, you have American Conservative Magazine. Those are some smart guys. But again, that's a magazine. We need a place for people like that to be cultivated. We need a place for people like that to teach. We need a home for the next Thomas Sowell or the next Paul Gottfried or the next Murray Rothbard. And then from there, once you have people who are educated and also right of center, they will start to move throughout the other institutions of our country, because it is the learned who run the bureaucracies, both corporate and public. And so, of course, the left dominates those as well. The colleges, the students, they permeate everything. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.